Hey guys, MC Mura here. Recently in the Ed patch where Capcom released Ed to the game, they also added a small balance patch that addressed a handful of characters. They secretly buffed the matchmaking for Street Fighter 6. If you're trying to look for a match now, a ranked or a casual match, you will notice the addition of a search range option. Now there is limited, there is expanded, and then worldwide. If you don't know, matchmaking have been a huge issue with Street Fighter 6 since launch. I've made not one but two separate videos on this matter, and the idea is Capcom have enforced a region lock on the matchmaking. Now this also heavily affects players, especially at the high level. One common complaint that you will hear about all the time is I keep running into the same dudes, I keep running into the same 4 or 5 guys. Here, for example, we got the Legends rank for the previous MR phase, and one thing that you will notice immediately is that it is very Japan heavy and very Asia heavy in general, right? So top 500, Kakeru was number 1, Noah, we got a US in there, Japan, Asia in general, Japan, Korea, Asia. It is just a lot of Japanese. The reason for this, the reason that Asia is so heavily presented in the top ranks is that it is a relatively small region, so the region locking doesn't affect them that much. Where if you're playing in Europe or in the United States, it's a large area, relatively speaking, so it is kinda segmented into smaller regions, so you got smaller number of players to play with, especially at the high level, and this does heavily affect your matchmaking pool. You are most likely running into lower MR players instead of high MR players, so you're not progressing as easily. Like I said, did add a search range option where you get limited, you get expanded, and you get worldwide, and this is an attempt for them to make it so that you are able to find players easier, or the game to kinda loosen up on the region locking to begin with. But I tried this out, it's a bit better, and I asked a lot of people, but I'm seeing mixed feedback. I'm seeing people say it's a lot better for them, I'm seeing people say it doesn't really matter that much. Obviously it's still new, I don't know if everyone is aware of it right now, but for me it's still a big fundamental issue with this game. How the game prioritize region locking, how the game prioritize your location over the connection quality. And you know what? Something that maybe people don't know, but Mura, myself, I'm a network engineer. This is my daytime job. So let's actually explain something. Let's explain networks to Capcom and how networking works, how the internet works, so that they're actually able to fix this. Because although this is a good change, and I will show you what happens when I set it to worldwide versus using a VPN, and then we're gonna go back, right? So I bet you didn't expect to see a video diagram in a Street Fighter 6 video, but here we are, right? Let's actually explain networks so that people can have an idea about like why Street Fighter 6 is so fundamentally flawed with its matchmaking algorithm, right? So let's say for example that here we got Mura's home. This is my house, and I'm someone to be fortunate enough to have 2 different internet connections, right? My household got 2. This is not the reality, this is an example. I got only 1. But let's say for example I got 2 routers here, one from ISP1 and one from ISP2, right? If I'm trying to connect to a friend who is on the same ISP as me, ISP1, let's say for example that we got this connection, and we got another one where I'm trying to play, let's say from my PC to my PlayStation in the same household, but from 2 different ISP connections. Which one do you expect to actually have lesser latency? It's actually this one. The guy who lives a couple of blocks down the line, because he's on the same ISP as me. What actually happens, how networks really work, is something like this, right? We're gonna have a CO, like let's say for example here, right? Let's make it. So this is like the CO, right? Central office or whatever, right? And then we're gonna have like 2 huge routers here. Right? This is like the main, call it like the main frame. They call it a provider edge router, right? So this is like the provider edge router for ISP1, and this is the provider router for ISP2, right? So what actually happens here is, if I'm trying to connect with the same, like in my same connection, I'm trying to go from one internet connection to the other, from ISP1 to ISP2, what happens is I will be routed this way to the provider edge router, and then go to the ISP2 through a gateway. I will hop over into the other ISP, and then from ISP2 to my second router, right? This is actually what happens. This is actually what happens in networking, right? These are multiple network hops, right? But if I'm trying to connect with my friend over here who's on the same ISP as me, it is simply like this. Now, if we assume that every one of these hops got the same distance, got the same lag, then here I only have to go through 2 hops, while in my same house, from a different connection to the other, I have to go 3, so through 3, so it is more latency. What I'm trying to say is the geographical location, the distance, is a factor obviously, but it's not the be-all end-all. There is a ton of other factors in networks, like the routing, how you're routed, the media you're going through. There is a ton of different element routing protocols. It's really complicated, but what I'm trying to say is further doesn't necessarily means more latency or worse connection, right? Now let's talk about the reality, right? This is the reality. This is Egypt. This is a country here, and this is the submarine cabling map. If you don't know, this is how you, for example, from the United States can connect to someone in the UK. There is a ton of like fiber cables under the sea, under the oceans, that connect the world together, right? It's a worldwide web. There's a ton of fiber cabling, as you can see, between the countries. So this is Egypt here, right? Let's zoom in into it. This is Egypt, right? Now, my Street Fighter 6 region, where Capcom is trying to look for games, is Saudi Arabia, it's Yemen, it's Iraq. Here, for example, is Emirates. It's trying to look in this area. But if you take a look at this, Egypt is on the fiber cables with Italy, with France, with Spain. They are on the same bus, they are on the same line. And that's why, in actuality, even though Saudi Arabia is right there, she's right next to me, I got better connections with Italy, with France, with Spain, because I'm on the same bus as them. I am not jumping through many different network hops to connect to Italy than I would if I wanted to connect to Saudi Arabia. With Saudi Arabia, if Egypt wanna go there, it have to go through this, right? I've got to like go through the loop instead of going directly. This is not how internet works. This is not how connections work in general, right? With all of that being said, what Capcom did here is pretty much trying to put a patch in an already flawed matchmaking logic. I'm gonna show you what happens when I set to search with a worldwide connections 2 to 5, and what happens if I set it to a VPN connection. So as you just saw, with a VPN connection, I'm able to get better quality matches, and I'm getting them much faster, even if I set the connection quality to limited. So yes, Capcom did, I think, take a step in the right direction. Yes, it's a little bit better now, and maybe down the line when everyone starts using worldwide or expanded to improve the matchmaking experience, maybe it will be better. But I still think what Capcom did here is a band-aid on an already faulty logic for how matchmaking should work, and generally the algorithm, I think, needs to be looked at. Let me know your experience on the matchmaking and how things have been on your end. Do you find it better, worse? How is everything on your end? I would love to hear all of this. Love to hear your feedback about it in the comment section below. We'll be leaving a link to the Patreon, Discord, Twitter, and Twitch pages in the description. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe.